My name is Malia Arrington. I split my time between Denver and LA. Let's see. So I am the executive director with a nonprofit called the Hollywood Commission. This is an organization that was started in 2017, late 2017, and it is a nonprofit that works to specifically address discrimination and harassment in the entertainment industry. So it's a little bit hard looking at my bio to kind of figure out what I did and where I came from, if that makes sense. But I think if there's a through line to my career, it's really that I've long had an interest in human rights and finding different ways to protect human rights. So my background is actually in law and biomedical ethics. And I've sort of taken that in a couple of different directions. So I did practice law when I first came out of law school. And then I also moved into sport to begin addressing abuses in sport, and then ultimately moved into entertainment in 2018. On a personal note, I have a 21-year-old and I have two perfectly adorable dogs. They're objectively adorable. I can't say enough good things about them. They are both about 10 pounds and just the sweetest little creatures. So I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
What part of your career are you most proud of?
I think I always feel good at telling people what I do. And it's not because what I do is more or less important than when anybody else does. It's just a sign to me that I like what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. And so I always am proud to be able to say that I do something that I enjoy. And I think that's, that can be a hard thing to find, right? Is sort of the thing that you enjoy.
Are you satisfied with your profession and where it is today?
I am. I think it's one of those things where, I'm really happy with the job that I'm doing now. I love working in entertainment, right? So any of you who are interested in entertainment or acting or theater, I would say keep doing that, because there's a fair amount of research that tells us that kids who come from theater and drama and any sort of performing arts do really, really well, because it makes you really agile, right? Like you can kind of respond to the moment and respond to like different people in different ways. So I love entertainment because I think that it sets culture, right? So the stories that we tell and the culture that we have is influenced incredibly by what we see on the screen. So an example of that is that after Captain Marvel, female applicants to the Air Force increased by like 33%. I don't actually know what the percentage is, but the point is it increased, right? Because more girls got to see an opportunity to see other people doing careers that they may or may not have been familiar with. So I'm really satisfied because I love entertainment. Again, I'm really passionate about human rights. So I love working in a space to help make the entertainment industry a better place to be. And I really like what I do on a day-to-day basis. And with that said, I think, part of any career is looking at what might be next, looking at how you can grow your skill set, how you can develop yourself as a better human.
So if I could ask one question, Malia, what does your day-to-day job look like?
It depends. So we are a really small nonprofit. And so as the executive director, I might be spending time on running payroll. So I'd like to make sure that people get paid. So I may be doing things like making sure that the payroll is run, and then sort of separate from that, like on the substantive side of work, I spend a lot of time meeting with other people in the industry about programs we're trying to implement. So my next meeting, for example, is with what they call independent producers. So a lot of what you see, so you probably are familiar with like Netflix and Max and Amazon, right? So those are your distributors. And those are the names you know. But the people who make the content are what are often called, or the people who often make the content are called independent productions or independent producers. So those tend to be smaller organizations, and they need different kind of resources to help address discrimination and harassment. So my next meeting is actually with some independent producers and one of the unions to talk about how we can work on some projects together. So I spend a lot of time in meetings thinking about these kinds of issues and collaborating and thinking out loud with people about how to do things. So I spend a lot of time doing that kind of thing, and then I'll take that information that I get today, I'll go back with pen and paper and begin sketching out their ideas based on what I heard. So it's about, sort of taking the information that I hear, beginning to develop a plan around it, and then going back to them and back and forth. Does that help? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think one of the things I'd like to also have our audience understand is, so, you kind of touched on what you do to achieve the goals you set out. Could you give us an idea of what kind of goals you set, like in your role for the company you're working for? One or two examples of what type of goals you're after, say this year or last year, maybe, if it's easier to discuss those.
Sure. So in my role, I'm going to be looking at a combination of revenue goals and I'll call them program goals. So, every year we project how many expenses we're going to have, and then on that other side of it, like how much is everything going to cost us to do? And so then on the other side of it, we are going to set revenue goals that go above and beyond what our projected costs are going to be. So I'm going to have goals around that without giving specific numbers.
Mm-hmm.
The program side, for example, we just launched a new tech platform to help people report something if something happens to them. So the goal, sort of, big picture last year was absolutely to launch this new technology platform to help people report. And then from there, some of our goals are around, how do we build awareness? So how many people do we want to be aware of the platform? If and when they use the platform, we have set goals around, do they trust the platform? Do they trust the platform to keep their information safe? Do they trust the platform to keep their information private? So do they trust sort of what the technology is actually supposed to do? And then, ultimately sort of like, do they know about it? Do they trust it? And then do they use it? Right. So we've set goals around use for the year as well.
How did you know you wanted to get into your current field when you were younger?
I did not. I had no idea. So, and even ultimately when I ended up in this role, I don't know that I could have ever sort of even, X number of years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago said, this is a thing that I really want to do. So actually a lot of the things that you all mentioned were things that I was really interested in. So, I grew up taking ballet. I was in the choir. I wanted to be an actress when I was a young kid. I loved animals. There were some folks in my family who were attorneys. There were folks in my family who were surgeons, right? So I think I was really interested in all of those things and ultimately landed on law and medical ethics. So I don't know that there was ever sort of a single moment where I even knew, I'm not even sure that 15, 20 years ago, like the role that I'm in now even really existed. So I think part of it is just staying really open to the possibilities.
How do you maintain a proper work-life balance?
Friends, family, and dogs. Dogs. Love dogs. I don't know if I've mentioned this 100 times already. So I think with friends, it's, keeping the really good ones in your life throughout your life is, I mean, they're always going to be an amazing support system. And, you know, finding those friends who are going to push you and are going to tell you how it is and are going to sort of hold you accountable, I think are really good people to have in your life. Family, you can't really avoid them, but you do get to pick some of them. So, you know, but just really making sure that let those people know how much they mean to you and demonstrate that by spending time with them and doing things for them and doing things without expecting anything in return. Dogs are just perfect. I mean, I'm sorry, like dogs are just perfect. So like finding, and there's an equivalent of that for everybody, right? Like whether it's animals or whatever, but like that thing that just sort of brings you pure joy when you see it or you do it, whether it's dance or it's yoga, like keeping that thing in your life, whatever that thing is, I'm a big supporter of.
So you mentioned that when you were younger, you didn't know if you wanted to get into law, but as someone who has like so many options going into like high school, there's so many electives. What would you say are some good courses they should pick to prepare for like law school and to pursue a career in law?
So the really lovely thing about law school is that the folks who go into it have, I would say, any number of backgrounds. So folks could have done English in their undergrad, or they could have been biology majors. Law school doesn't really have, I would say, the same prerequisites that somebody who wants to go into medical school does. So for high school, and actually I would say this even going into college or university a little bit, is take what interests you, because there's nothing that's going to limit you, right? But if you want to see, am I really going to be interested in law? You know, I'm sure there are classes in political science. I don't really know, right? But it's probably political sciences and government courses. I don't know. I mean, some people, when they go into law, they're really interested in business law, right? So what they want to do is they want to help other businesses merge with other businesses, right? That's a whole different specialty. So what specific area of law do you think you're interested in? Some people do environmental law, right? So what they want to do is they want to go into public policy, right? So there are any number of sort of things like that. You know, there's litigation, there's criminal law, right? So prosecuting or defending. So it's huge, you know, and when you go into law, if you go into law, you'll find that your family members want you to answer questions about wills and estates, and you have no idea what they're asking them. You're like, I don't know. I have a law degree. I have no idea what you're asking me. Not my area of law. So it's a little bit like medicine, right? Like a surgeon's not going to necessarily be able to answer things about what an anesthesiologist does. They'll have a basis, but not the whole picture.
Yeah. Would you say that going to like an Ivy League school would be like better, or do you think the same like curriculum would apply at any other like law schools? Like, say if you went to Harvard or like some random school that still teaches you what you need.
Or undergrad, do you mean?
Just any like law degree.
Yeah, so the way it would sort of go is, you know, you have your 4 years of undergrad and then you would apply to law school, right? So in terms of, you know, I think you have to think a little bit about your personality and the personality of the school as well, because sometimes the personality of the school doesn't fit who you are and how you work, in which case you're probably not going to be happy or as successful. So, you know, law school can be really hierarchical, and it can be easier to get a job if you go to sort of some of the top ranked law schools. And there are tons of people who are amazing attorneys who didn't go to a quote unquote Ivy League, right? And they're better attorneys than people who did. So I think you can be successful coming out of any school if you are committed and passionate about it.
Would it help to have a PhD in law?
So they sometimes have what they call like masters in law, but not necessarily like a PhD. So when you come out, you get what's called a JD or a Juris Doctorate. There are some master's programs or a PhD programs. Those are going to be more, I don't know, they can be helpful, I think, if you're going into like a policy area, or if you want to teach, that could be helpful. But I don't think, I would not, if what you want to do is practice law, I don't think you need anything beyond the JD.
What made you, like, I know you're still kind of in the law like area now, but what made you switch from being like a lawyer to working in the nonprofit that you work in now?
I didn't like practicing law, so it was really easy. So it was really easy to decide that I didn't like practicing law and that I wanted to do something different. The transition was hard, right? Trying to find that thing. But yeah, I mean, for me, ultimately, so I clerked for some judges after law school. I loved that. And then I went into practice, and it didn't sort of, I don't know, it wasn't very energizing for me, right? It wasn't like the thing that got me out of bed, but it taught me some really amazing skills that I don't regret having. And so ultimately I knew that I wanted to make a transition and get back to some of the things around ethics and human rights. So that was kind of the, and it's, again, I'm really happy that I did it. I don't regret having done any of it. It was a really fantastic experience. Just needed to do something different.
What are some struggles you had in your career, and how did you overcome them?
My career. So I think always having confidence is something that, sometimes you have a ton of it and you can go with it. And there are other times maybe it's because you've taken a new job, or you have transitioned to a new area and you don't feel like you know it as well. So, finding confidence and having confidence and believing in yourself is a thing always. I think when I was your age, I was like, when you're an adult, you don't have any problems. Like, I really was like, you grow up and you don't fight with your friends, and like everyone is sort of, confident and they feel really good about themselves. I have no idea where I got this idea from. But I really had this idea that would happen. So, I think, especially when you are making a transition and striking out to do something new, finding the confidence to just know that you can do it, is a key. I think to overcome that, I just have to work at it, right? It's like, I hate public speaking. And there are things about my role that require public speaking. So it's about sort of saying, there's this thing that this role requires me to do, that I'm not good at, or I don't think I'm good at, and I'm just going to work at it because this is what I need to do. Like, this is what the role requires. So,
what advice would you give to anyone who wants to pursue a career in law?
Know why you want to do it. So, I say that because I was sort of asking, what area of law do you think you're interested in? So I think there are some who go into it because they think they really want to do policy work, and great, right? Just sort of like focus your career on that side of things. So just sort of be clear then, it seems interesting to me. All right, so explore as much as you can, and then sort of really take time to figure out what area of the law you think you're really interested in, and go that way.
Would you recommend this job to the next generation?
Yes. There's always sort of that hope that the next generation won't be facing some of the, right, as a nonprofit, you're always trying to work yourself out of a job because the problem will have been solved for. That's how, when you're talking about discrimination and harassment, these are issues that have existed for thousands of years. So it's going to take more than 5 years to solve it. But I think it's interesting. It's complicated. It's challenging. There are great people who care about this kind of issue. Well, yeah, I mean, no regrets. I think it's a great way to go if it's something that you're passionate about.
Any other follow-up questions?
You ate a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Was I too chatty? I'm sorry.
Oh no,
No, they're saying they learned a lot.
Oh, okay.
I have one question, Malia.
Yeah.
You said I don't know the right word. Is it that you majored in law and medical ethics?
So my undergrad, sorry, that's a great question. So my undergrad was in international relations, which is sort of a brand of political science, if you will, right? So my undergraduate was in international relations, which meant I had a requirement that I study a lot of language, political science, social science, things like that. And then once I graduated from university, I did my law degree and my master's in biomedical ethics at the same time.
Got you.
I was wondering, is there anything that you would do over, like any choices that you made, and what would you do instead?
So I'm sure someone else will say this because I think I think a lot of people say this, like, I don't necessarily believe in regret, because I think even when you make choices you wish you hadn't made, you learn something from them. So I think a regret or a fail is only when you don't learn from something, right? Like you do something wrong and then you don't learn from it. That would be a fail. But I think, so from that perspective, no. The one thing that I think I would have held on to is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. When I was closer to your age, I did do a lot of more creative things. So, the dance and the acting and the singing. And then when I got into probably grad school, when I got to law school, I did less and less of that. And I only recently started doing a lot of it again and realized how much I missed it. So I think that's another way of saying, like, just hold on to those things that, you love doing now, because that's a really good sign that you love doing those things. So that's maybe the only thing that I would have done a little bit differently.
I love what you said about regret. I think everybody you can't say it enough. It needs repetition, and is really good to remind ourselves, no matter what phase of life we're in.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I want to go back to something you shared just now about your law degree, and then you did the master's in biomedical ethics.
Sure.
I have a two-part question. One is, I'm curious what made you choose biomedical ethics, and then the follow-up is, how much of what you learned in, like, the trade-specific skills that you learned in law school and in your master's, have you used in your career?
Yeah, sure. So biomedical ethics. So when I was in my undergrad, for your last year, for your senior year, they gave me the option of, along with many other students, the options of doing a thesis, which is essentially like a really fancy word for, you get to research a lot and then write about, like, come up with your own unique idea about what happened. And so up until that point, I had done a lot of studies. This is a really long answer. I had done a lot of studies around medicine. So again, I have a lot of science folks in my family. So I had done a lot around medical science, and then had done a lot of research around how the law had, what I would say is, like, misused medicine, and how it had misused medicine sort of to drive a social narrative. So I found those issues really, really interesting, and that's what I did my thesis. I did my thesis around one of those issues, and wanted to continue having a conversation with those kinds of questions. So to the second question around, do I use them? Yes, I use both. So especially if you're looking at discrimination and harassment, there are a bunch of laws that speak to what you can and cannot do in the workplace. So understanding those laws and understanding how to find out what those laws are as you're trying to do work across any workplace is really helpful. So I definitely use it there. And then on the ethics side, whether it's biomedical ethics or it's some other form of ethics, that's really just like a framework for how do you think about questions and problems, and what are the principles, like do no harm, right? Like, what does that really mean? And you can apply that in a lot of different contexts, whether it's medicine or it's in the workplace. So I do use the sort of the thinking frameworks, even though I'm not practicing law and I'm not a biomedical ethicist at this time.
Wow, thank you. I think, like you said, it's probably one of the answers that many folks would give about how their education is helping them, but you've put it beautifully.
Good.
Because I feel like, and I've heard this even from my peers when I was going to college, right? They're like, well, how much of this are we going to use when I go into my job? Like, this is not a good use of my time, or this is not a good use of my money, whatever it is, right? But then you fail to understand all the transferable skills that you pick up, and that's really what it is. It's not like you're going to do calculus when you go into your job, right? Unless you're going to pursue a degree in mathematics. But those analytical and reasoning skills are not otherwise going to be built, and you won't have the opportunity to exercise those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can remember even when I was in law school, right? So I'm not even once I was at high school and I was at college and I was into law school, one of the professors at the end of our first semester said, a lot of folks ask me, what should I take next year, right? Like, what should the next thing be that I take? And so even though we were in a law school, his response was, take something you're really interested in. Like, take something like from some other college, meaning like, I don't know, go take an art class, right? Because his point was, this is one of your last opportunities to have this fantastic liberal arts education moments, right? So, and in the same way, like, I took a lot of science going through college, even though that wasn't where I was ultimately going to go. So, and I just think you can get so much more exploration if you're kind of just leave your windows open, you're going to see a lot more than if you're like, the only thing I'm going to do is, I don't know, study orchids. Sorry, I'm looking at an orchid on my table. Right? Like, I'm a botanist. I'm just going to look at orchids all day, right? Like, you might miss a whole bunch of stuff around it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think so.
You definitely gave them a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
Well, it's really exciting, and I love that you all did this with your time this summer. So,
Malia, any closing thoughts? Anything related to, I mean, you've already shared so many nuggets of wisdom about how to look at education, how to pursue your interests, how to keep yourself engaged, all of that, work-life balance. You touched on a lot of those. Any other closing thoughts for those who are, thinking, I have no idea what I want to do for my career?
Well, I didn't either when I was your age. And quite frankly, I didn't really even know coming out of college. I took a year off to kind of figure it out. So I think one would be, for me, right? Like, for me, it would be, don't feel pressure to know that thing immediately, right? So, give yourself some space. And then I think the other thing is, everyone's different, right? And just remembering like that thing that sort of rings true to you and hold on to that, because I think there are some folks who are like, they woke up and they were like, I'm going to be a vet. And they knew they were going to be a vet from day one and didn't have any questions about it. And that's amazing. Right. And you know, go for it. Like if you know from a young age, perfect. And if you don't, that's okay. Right. Because everyone's different. Everyone is on a different timeline. And don't try to think about what makes sense for you, regardless of what somebody else is doing. That's the beautiful thing. We're all incredibly different.
Yeah.
That's very, very helpful. I know that's something that I would want them to hear over and over again too. So, thank you for such wonderful insights and sharing your experience with us.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
let me know if you have any other questions. I'm excited for you all. All right.
Hey guys, hope you learned something new from this video. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Bye!